Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis, and today I'll be talking to Elizabeth Green, co-founder of Jungler, a specialist agency for Amazon advertising. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today is Amazon ads. What are they? How do they work? And how can we use them more effectively? Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, same here. This is something that fascinates me. I think a lot of people are fascinated by e-commerce, Amazon. We hear a lot about that in culture. Everything from people's side hustles all the way up to
Yeah.
multi-million pound businesses. So just to set the scene before we get started, just tell me what we're talking about here when we actually talk about Amazon ads. What are they?
Yeah. So most of the ads we're going to be talking about today are like our sponsored ads, which are ads that show up on the Amazon platform itself. I'm sure if you've shopped on Amazon, you have seen one of these ads. They show up some of them are quite obvious, some of them are not so obvious. But the giveaway is there's always going to be a very small grayed out sponsored on these placements. Some of them again show up on search grids. You'll have seen video ads, the banners at the top of the screen, all of the above.
Hmm.
That's typically when you say Amazon ads, the types of ads that people are talking about. And then this ad type, because it is on platform, you can imagine that to have access to these ad types, you have to be selling a product on the platform. Now, that platform could be any Amazon platform. So you could be selling in UK, France, Germany, Spain, basically
Hmm.
anywhere that there is an Amazon specific platform, and you are selling a product through that marketplace or platform, you will have
Yeah.
access to these ads.
And am I right in thinking that they mostly show up in search results? That's where I feel like I almost always see ads, but there are other places as well, by the sounds of it.
There are. So pretty much any page that you load on Amazon will
Mm.
have some sort of sponsored ads embedded in
Right.
it. So the most common ones are going to be like, again, like you said, the search pages, but then also on product pages as well. So have you ever been shopping and you scroll down, you're like, oh, this product's pretty good. Oh, wait, there's a carousel down here. Oh, these sound great. Let me click on one of these and then
Yep.
go over to that product page. Those are sponsored ads as well. Again, they're kind of sneaky. Like a lot of
Mm.
those, the most common ad type to run is called sponsored product ads, which are the ones that kind of show in that carousel, and they also show in the search grids. So you've ever been
Got it.
shopping and you kind of see, just a product that looks very native to the platform. It looks like, again, like those carousels, it looks like Amazon's just kind of serving up additional products, and that they are, but those
Mm.
are sponsored placements. And so these ad,
Yep.
like this specific ad type has the most ad inventory, and it also looks the most native. So by
True.
default, that typically is where most of the budget goes, for any advertiser, regardless of budget size. Like beginning, you're probably almost only running sponsored product ads. And then even if you're running, say, a really robust full funnel ad strategy, this ad type probably still makes up about 75% of your total spend.
Interesting. That is very interesting. I'm definitely going to want to set up some sort of Amazon shop by the end of the hour talking to you. So what's unique about? I mean, we've a lot of people listening, myself included. We've worked with a lot of the big ad platforms like Google, Meta.
Mhm.
What what's different about the Amazon ad platform? What's unique about that compared to them? Do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll give you one thing that's maybe not specifically unique, and then I'll give you another thing
Mm,
that is
do
100% unique. So the one that's probably not very unique, but also something that's really important to understand when you're running any, like, again, sponsored ads on Amazon, is the fact that, as you said, these are all very search based. So the beauty of like the Amazon platform in general, Amazon.com or others, is that it is a very like conversion specific platform. If you're going to Amazon, you're
yeah.
most likely in the mode to purchase. I know that there's a lot of people say like, oh, a lot of the exploration and searches happen on Amazon. But even if you're doing sort of an exploratory search, for example, like gift for mom, Mother's Day or something like
Mm,
that, like you're still with the intention, some sort of purchase intention. I think very rarely do
Yeah.
shoppers go to the platform and say, "Oh, let me just see what I can buy today," especially in today's economy. Like most people are just like looking to randomly purchase things.
True.
So with a very again like consumer centric and very search based. So they're going in, they're typing in something specific. I want to look for this, and of course, so your ads are a way to basically capture that search demand and then funnel it towards your product.
So
So
is it
that's
a bit more like Google ads than Facebook and Instagram ads, for instance, because it's
correct.
intent based? It's not just trying to drive awareness for something you might buy in a year's time.
Right, exactly. There are some sort of awareness plays you can do, but again, when we're
Mhm.
talking on platform sponsored ads where
Yeah.
most of your ad budget is going, it's really mid to bottom of the funnel. You can kind of sort of capture demand. What I always tell people is that it's actually quite difficult to create demand when we're talking about just sponsored ads on Amazon.
Yeah.
What you really are looking to do is to harness existing demand. So your comparison to Google, 100% correct in like say Google search ads. Now, where it differs from Google search ads is that originally, when Google search ads came out, like you could kind of game the system, you could throw a bunch of money at it and you could have your website rank up in search, right? And then
Yeah.
Google realized, oh wait, this is not within our best interest to do this and to keep this running. So like we're going to cut this off and we're not going to have impact of ranking from our advertising because it didn't create a good consumer experience for Google. Now that's different on Amazon. So the way that it works on Amazon is just listen. I tell everyone, like, if you're trying to figure out what's going to make sense, just listen to what Amazon says they want to do, right? They want to have a good
Mm.
consumer experience. They want to offer the best products at really good prices. And so they're looking for when someone goes and types on Amazon that they're able to find and then purchase what it is that you're looking for. And essentially, you can use ads to tap into that. So you can show your products. When someone searches, I'm going to say gift for mom or something. Again, that's a little
Mm.
bit broader. You might want to say like pink gift basket for mom or something. Again, we're looking at search intent here. But
Yeah.
if I show up at say the top of the page or middle of the page, or I get found through an advertising, view and then click, and this is pay per click. So you're not charged for impressions. There are pay per impression models, but majority is pay per click. So if I get seen and then I click and then I create, a conversion happens from that click, that will be factored in. This is a very general summary of Amazon's algorithm, but trust me, I've read all the white papers, gone all the deep dives, and basically you walk away with, oh, it's about order velocity and it's about conversions. And those order velocities and conversions are very relative to the competition on that search page. So how am I doing versus, kind
Got
of
you.
everybody else? But the thing is that if I can create a click and conversion, I still created a click and conversion, and the shopper still had to purchase. Where when
Yep.
Google was doing it, like they just had to click on it, and make sure that they viewed that page, but
Yep.
whether or not that was a good, again, kind of consumer experience, there wasn't a way to sort of vet that and make sure that the search results weren't getting really, really crappy by people just like throwing a ton of money at
Mm.
it. And so the way in which Amazon, like it actually is within their best interest because they're like, hey, I
Mm.
still need to get good conversion rates and I still have to make sure that those clicks are converting. So they're willing to take my money all day long for the click, but if I don't convert, they're not going to push me up in the organic search results. And then, I'm just wasting money anyways, and nobody's going to continue that, or nobody should. So there's this nice, beautiful, positive cycle if you can get
Yeah.
it. So again, as advertisers, we always want to spend ad dollars well, and we want to make sure that our clicks are converting. And so for that reason, um, we're still going to sort of funnel those ad dollars into the places where we are making those conversions. So from like a general like good business sense optimization, we're probably going to
Mm.
be running more effective ads, which again is within Amazon's best interest. And then as long as those are leading to conversions, we're going to
Yeah.
have that positive impact on the algorithm because they're like, hey, I don't care if you paid for this click. I don't care if you got it organically,
Mm.
but we can vet that the consumer has a good experience so that end consumer
Yeah.
conversion will be factored in, and then so you actually do have impact on organic search results through
Yeah.
advertising.
I get that. That's really interesting and well explained. Thank you. That is really fascinating. That because critics would say, of course, oh well, so that means basically anyone can turn up, and whoever's got the deepest pockets can just buy loads of ads,
Hmm.
increase what you call in, which I'm going to ask you about in a minute, click and order velocity. So basically lots of them rising quickly in short space of time, presumably, and then you just buy your way into that, and then you win in the natural search results as well. But you're making the point, of course, that if you've got a crappy product no one wants and it's not converting, well, no, actually, you could chuck $1 million at it, and if no one can convert and you don't get that organic win because you're not getting that rush of conversions. So
Hmm.
that is very interesting. So go on then. Tell me what this velocity metric means. Do you know much about how that's calculated, or is it secret?
It's very secret. We can gauge sort of like the impacts based on, just our experience that we've run. And
Yeah.
also, I have a lot of good friends in the space, and we're all just the one thing I really love about the Amazon community in general is everyone, they won't share products because obviously product selection, right? But up until
Yeah.
that, like any hacks or tips or, oh, I found this, the community is quite open
That's nice.
about things that they found, which is great. I do want to add one more bit of context to the whole velocity and the thing you were talking about, but just like again, spamming ads and having to get a
Mm.
conversion. Um, there is one nuance to being able to show up even if you do create good order velocity, and that is relevancy. So the one thing
Mm.
that is baked into the ad algorithm as well as, just the algorithm in general is this idea of sort of categories or what Amazon in some spaces will call niches. And it's honestly, it is amazing if you deep dive into sort of the specific algorithm they've built. It's great and fascinating. But essentially what they're doing is they're creating sort of clusters of consumer searches, and this is in some ways in real time, and sort of creating
Mm.
like relevancy or category buckets. And what they're doing, if you want to get super technical with it, there's something called browse tree nodes. And so it's essentially saying, okay, we identified that this category contains these types of products, and this is the consumer behavior around this category. And so when we assign a specific product to a category or subcategory, we know that these are sort of the relevant searches around that. And they do that because
Mm.
there are certain products that, right, move quicker, have better conversions. And so they're not interested when somebody goes in and types in running shoes to have running socks show up at the top of the page. There might be greater conversions and velocity on socks, but they don't want that crossover. They do want a good consumer experience. So there are
Yes.
sort of those safeguards where I'm never going to be really able to like game the system of
Mm.
trying to show up my baby clothes on a, again, like running shoe keyword or something totally random like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can pretty much bid as absolutely high as I possibly can, and I will probably
Mm.
never get impressions for a keyword like that if it's so outside the bounds of what is relevant to the
Just to
product.
stop you hijacking popular terms
Right,
and spoiling
exactly.
the user experience of Amazon. Yeah.
Exactly.
But again, you've raised another question there in what you said about the Amazon community, and one thing they don't share is products. And yeah, I've sensed that the bits I've heard about it is that the kind of the skill or the art of of being a successful Amazon seller can be just being on top of trending products,
Yes.
and you don't want to be the 1,000th person. You want to be the 10th or 20th person to jump on a trending product for which there is huge demand. And like you say, you're just then capturing and capitalizing on that demand. So am I
Hmm.
right in thinking that a big part of it is that trend watching kind of element?
Yeah, I would say it is trend watching, but there's also like you want to be careful of trends because trends can also be a flash in the pan. So an
Yeah.
example would be like, remember when fidget spinners came out and everybody
Yeah.
like lost their minds and like the
Yeah.
the trend was huge, and now like I haven't looked at the search volume on that, but I'm sure it's, kind of, it was a bit of a flash in the pan. Or for example, during the pandemic, sneeze guards were a huge thing. Like everybody had
Right.
like the plexiglass thing, right? Volumes on that were insane and the costs were quite high. Like some people made out, some of them were our clients. But they got in at the right time. And again, if everybody gets in on those things, like, oh, the volume is there, so there is some level of that. And I would say, yes, one of the huge things when it comes to winning on Amazon has to be the product selection, and also the product development. Um,
Mm.
Again, because of that, really that conversion rate and order velocity. That's what it's all about. And again, it's
Yeah.
relative to the competition. So even if I said, okay, so fidget spinners are huge, okay, great. A lot of people hopped on with, oh, I can get these really quick from the factory. I have the
Mm.
factory images, and then all of a sudden everybody's images look exactly the same. The other thing
Yeah.
with those sponsored product ads that I was telling you about, and how that's where most of the ad inventory is, there is no creatives associated with running those ads, which is kind of nice. It makes them very easy to get up. So it's really about, again, one, the targeting strategy and how you're
Mm.
building those out effectively to make sure, again, you're targeting the right audience and you're doing it in a way that can be profitable. But the creative is what your listing is. You can think of listings like landing pages, but the difference is all of those landing pages are viewed in a single grid.
Yeah.
So it's not really like, say, Google search results. There's not really much creatives. It's what's your headline,
Well,
or
your main product image ends up being a creative, doesn't it?
correct,
And
correct.
so
So
that's how you try and in some way communicate this isn't just the same one as all the other products with just a different name. We've
right.
tweaked this slightly because again, I've sort of heard, you know, around the edges that what a lot of people do is they'll find a trending product and they'll go to a manufacturer and they'll get them to just tweak it slightly and just
Mm-hmm.
make it slightly different so that it is in some way unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a fidget spinner but it's in the shape of a hexagon and everyone else is doing square and circle ones or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So I get there's a bit of that to it as well.
Yeah. So
That's
there's
interesting.
layers. Like originally people were doing, what you call, like, I guess drop shipping is more like ship from the manufacturer, but it's like, like, hey,
Mm,
just exact same product. I'm not changing a dang thing about it. Just ship it in,
mm,
let's go. And then you have like the white label products, which is, okay, let's take it and let's just slap a brand on it, right? We're not really changing
yep.
anything. And that kind of worked up until maybe you could get away with it up to like 2018, maybe
Oh,
2019.
interesting.
And then now there might be certain spaces where you could still kind of get away with that,
Mm,
if you know how to package it correctly and you sort of brand it correctly. But more likely than not, you're in the sort of the era of what we call like private label products, or true brands,
mm,
where you're not just saying, hey, just slap my logo on it and let's call it good. You're doing specific market research. You're saying, okay, what does the market want?
yep.
Fantastic way to do this is go and look at the reviews, positive and negative, on some of the top products in the space, and say, okay, that
Yes.
everyone's like, oh man, I wish it was like this. This piece broke. This piece did that. Again, there's a lot of sellers, when I talk to them, they'll say, oh yeah, like they've done that intense keyword research, or they've done
Mm,
that product research, and they're like, yeah, I noticed that everyone in the market, everybody was complaining that it rips, so we have like a thicker quality of product. Or we noticed that there was this function missing, and so now we have this function. Or we've bundled it with this because we realized that people were purchasing these two products together, and so we've created a bunch. So like they're doing all of that intense research, and yet I can't tell you, and this is mostly new sellers. Savvy sellers know this, but you'll go to their listings and you'll be like, I saw none of this. Like, you're
mm,
telling me it has a thicker, it's a thicker product, it's better quality. Hey, I'm the real premium quality. If that product information is not translated in your listing, and more specifically, because a lot of times I'll tell you, like, I didn't get any of this. You're like, oh yeah, it's in the bullet points. Yeah, it's like one random small note
yeah.
in, like, nobody reads it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Like, I'm a notorious, as much as I completely understand like listing SEO and the importance, and I know where to find the information more than most. I'm probably a
Yeah, it's
have
got
the
to be
potential.
blindingly obvious, hasn't it? And
Right.
out
I'm
there.
like,
And
if it's not in your images,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Like, I have no time, right? So you
same.
really need to think of like, is it accurately conveyed? Do you have a really good specific? If someone flips through your images, can they get all of that from
Yes. Yeah.
that? And so that's really, again, where you start to stand out, because when we're talking, say, order velocity, there's two sides to that. There's the traffic and there's the conversions, and that's how you get the sales. That's how you grow
Yeah.
sales. Drive a lot of traffic, make sure that traffic converts. We want to talk about doing it properly as a business. Well, then we can talk about, okay, am I converting that traffic at a cost that makes sense for me, that's sustainable? But
And do you know what's interesting in the world of e-commerce advertising? It's obviously all the excitement nowadays is around social commerce and TikTok
yeah.
Shop. And I'm curious, have you noticed the impact, any impact that you can be fairly sure of on Amazon and Amazon ads of the TikTok Shop phenomenon happening over there?
There absolutely is. And the way in which you see it is typically a rise in branded search.
Hmm.
Because I myself, so I, this is just like me understanding how I operate as a consumer.
Yeah.
Um, TikTok Shop is very much larger than, it was. It's still a very Wild West days to it.
Oh yeah.
Um, but it it is sort of that interruptive. So you can, that is the benefit, is you can create demand through TikTok advertising,
You
because
can.
it's like it's interruptive advertising, right?
Yeah.
There are specific searches. One might go on and say like, okay, I want to know how to do this, and then of course, say somebody is advertising for a specific product and say, okay, well, that
Hmm.
product looks good, right? um so you can sort of create that demand. However, in terms of, I think there is more and more consumer trust in the TikTok platform, but they don't have the same
Yeah.
level of trust that Amazon has built. As
No.
much as, if you talk
No.
to sellers, they'd be like, "Ah, Amazon allows anyone to return anything." Like, there's certain aspects to selling that it's like, because they're so customer centric, it is quite frustrating. Seller support, they do in some ways kind of feels like they leave sellers behind a little bit in that
Yeah, I
equation.
can imagine because they are so consumer. They just want to please the consumer. But that's funny because it's made them, they've gone from being this scary kind of new, slightly, yeah, hacky, wild westy marketplace that people, the high end brands wouldn't touch, by the way. 10
Right.
years ago, Apple were like, yeah, we're not selling on Amazon. Now they sell on Amazon. And it's now become the safe, it's like Walmart or Macy's and everything else in between, isn't it? It's the safe, old, established option. My point is, when I think about the stuff that's arriving at my door, I've been an Amazon customer for 24 years, but in the last year, TikTok Shop I'm still buying more from Amazon, but some of that stuff is now coming from TikTok Shop. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. So I'm just wondering if some people, some of your clients are like, look, we're actually allocating a bit of resource over there now, or because I can imagine a lot of products that, but it's of course, yes, it's different stages of the funnel. It's demand generation over on TikTok. It's intent capturing on Amazon, but still, I'm just
Yeah.
curious about that.
And I'm interested to see how it plays out long term. China might do this very well in a very much an integration between entertainment and purchasing.
Big time. That's very much come from
And
China. Yeah.
in the world of US e-commerce specifically, I don't know what it's like, as I live in the US, so I have much more context here.
Mm.
I don't think TikTok Shop is trying to solve it, but there is not a specific platform in which entertainment and purchasing is closely intertwined. And it's really fascinating because you have things like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now, other platforms where
Mm.
they have the entertainment factor. So people go there to be, entertained in the social media aspect, but no one goes to those platforms intent on purchasing. And yet
Yeah.
Amazon has a very, like we've talked about, a very purchase intent model, which is why it does so well. And again, that consumer trust that they've built up, I think
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos was very wise in his sort of original thesis, I think holds true, is that consumers will never want slower shipping, they will always want great prices, and they will always want a large variety of products. And he
True.
stayed true to that. And I
Yeah.
think if they ever waffle on that, I think that will start to be the decline of Amazon. But if they can continue to stay true to that thesis, I think they will continue to win. My opinion. Um,
Yeah. And I think they'll continue to just sell the less impulse purchases, the basics of life, everything from,
yeah, and
beds and wardrobes through to your groceries and everything in between,
yeah, and Amazon, it's interesting because like so Facebook, Instagram, because they have like Instagram Shop, TikTok Shop. It seems like all of those more again like entertainment centric platforms are trying to solve for the purchase intent equation, and Amazon has put
Okay.
out certain they've tried Amazon Lives, they tried Amazon Posts, they
Yes.
tried to have sort of it like entertainment, but like they haven't
Yeah.
solved for the entertainment aspect. There was some talks of like integrations of TikTok and Amazon.
Hmm.
They never fully came into fruition. There was just some random announcements and some like sort of integrations. Facebook has the option of the consumer has to enact it. If you ever see a advertisement on Facebook for an Amazon product, you will have the option to say link your Facebook account with Amazon, and then you can see like in real time
Yeah.
it will allow you to say purchase right from the advertisement.
All
Or
right.
so there have been some attempts to sort of break down the barriers when it comes
Mm.
to the consumer experience to have a more fluid integration. And I think
Mm.
that maybe the best way to solve it, my personal
Mm.
opinion in the future, is if anyone can truly solve, like the reason why everyone's flocking to TikTok is because one, their algorithm, the For You page, it's terrifying
It's
how well it
addictive.
thinks. It's
Yeah.
addictive, and it is very much a entertainment centric, and sort
Yes.
of they've done very
Yeah. Yeah.
well with sort of marrying that with a consumer aspect. I don't know how
Okay.
well integrated it is, and I don't know how well the consumer trust is. I think on some terms, because they've done really interesting things with how like influencers can benefit from it, and like kind of like the shoppable advertisements. But
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some ways, at least I speak from my own personal perspective, it seems as if they've sort of eroded some of that sort of natural organic impressions.
That's what people who don't like TikTok say about TikTok. It's just full of ads, or things that are
Yeah,
essentially ads if they're
yeah.
not actual ads. Yeah, I think that's interesting just to hear your take on that. Another thing I was going to ask you just quickly was, I watched Shark Tank. I don't know, I'm sure you're a fan of Shark Tank, given the business you're in. And when someone rocks up on Shark Tank and they've got these great numbers, and then someone goes, "So where are your sales coming from?" And they go, "Well, it's 80% Amazon," or something like that. And the sharks always go like that, like as if that's a bad thing, as if like an over reliance on Amazon, sales from Amazon is a bad thing rather than your own e-commerce store. Is that because Amazon is erratic and unpredictable as a sales channel? Is it because you need paid ads to drive sales? I've just always wondered that. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. I think for a couple reasons. One, Amazon businesses, even though they were businesses, were not seen as sort of a true e-commerce business for a very long time.
Okay.
Now, that sentiment somewhat shifted During, I think a little bit before, and then definitely during the pandemic when everything
Right.
sort of shifted online. And there were a lot of aggregators that came into the Amazon space that were specifically purchasing Amazon businesses. And so for the first time, investment capital was actually prioritizing the purchase of Amazon businesses. Where before, if you would have tried
Mm.
to, say, go get a loan or you wanted to sell your business, there was still, don't get me wrong, Amazon businesses that were being sold, but there was this um
Yeah,
sort
perception.
of
It's not a real business. You don't own your
right,
or
right.
your
So that this
customer.
perception or the valuations, it wasn't the same or
Yeah.
whatever. Now, unfortunately, a lot of those aggregators made very poor decisions. There's a lot of them have gone out. They found that it's a little bit harder to run an Amazon business than they thought. You know, sometimes there's certain things
Mm.
that investment capital gets right, and there's some things that it gets really wrong when it comes to the actual execution of things. And I think both sides can learn from each other. So that sort of frenzy, it was almost like it was an absolute like feeding frenzy for a while. The evaluations are like ridiculous, to be honest.
Oh wow.
Um, has very much wound down, and yet also there was sort of a, you know, so it has settled, but there was that sort of authenticity that was lent to Amazon brands. Now that
Okay.
might not be fully apparent in, say, something like Shark Tank, but I would say in general, it's much more, I don't know if the word is credible than it used to be.
It
But
is. I just wondered if it was because that sort of slight ambivalence was because you are ultimately going through a third party. They're not landing on your brand.com website. Then do you know what I mean? And do you think? I suppose the following question: do companies struggle with that if it's sort of intermediated by Amazon? Do they struggle having any sort of customer base, or how anonymous are their customers to them? And are you always essentially trying to get people over to your website once you've sold to them on Amazon, or do we not really worry about that?
yeah, I think it's highly dependent on the brand.
Right.
It is still possible to build a brand starting on
Um.
Amazon. Now,
Mm,
again, there's like, you know, the ultimate hero stories that you hold up, and then there's, you know, kind of what the average happens. But one
yeah.
huge hero story is Hero Pimple Patches. They were a very Amazon centric brand. And now look where they are now. Now, have they grown beyond Amazon? Absolutely, right?
Mm.
But they obviously exited out of fantastic evaluations. Again, results definitely may vary in that case. And I do understand um you know, Shark Tank and their hesitation, because the one thing that is true is that if you are getting seen and found on Amazon, well, um you have to realize that, again, the order velocity and conversion rate velocity. So for example, say you go out of stock, right?
Yeah.
You are losing that order velocity and that sales velocity. And
Yeah.
then as you come back into stock, well, you are currently now behind your competitors. And so you're going to have
Yeah.
to ramp up to kind of get back to where you were, versus if it's your own e-commerce site. Now we can talk about, you know, if people keep landing on your e-commerce site and you're out of your best products, are they really going to come back? Yeah, okay. So there's that aspect as well. But like, you're not still continuously, like, say, vying for that purchase intent. Now we're, and this would get a little bit more nuanced in it, but I would say if you said, okay, so yes, am I using Amazon as my conversion channel? Absolutely. But guess what? 70% of my purchases that I'm, you know, 70% of the places that people come and find me is through a branded search. And so, yes,
Yeah.
maybe I'm using it as my conversion channel, but they are loyal customers. And I think that would be a differentiation where you might have some issues in terms of that long-term brand plays. If you said, yep, it's on Amazon, and you know what, if they don't come and you know, they're not searching for X widget and finding me, well, then I'm not going to find it. But it is still possible.
Yeah.
So if you have prominent branding, you can have, say, inserts. You know, it is your product. If you want to have your own website on your packaging, I definitely would.
Yeah.
There's that. And I've been surprised that there's a lot of our brands who, when we take a look at it, we say, "Oh yeah, you know, you're getting some branded church," and they're like, "Really? Like, people are actually searching for us? We don't feel like we're selling that much." If people know and like the products enough, they will start
Oh, you
searching.
only have to buy a product once. I've done it myself. You know those made up, what seem like made up brand names on Amazon, and I bought one thing from them. It's been really good, and so I've sought out similar products from them because I'm like,
Right,
well, if the one thing works, better the devil you know, right? And
right.
so I get that. Um, okay, when someone comes to you and they're like, right, obviously their brief is, we just want to grow this business. We want to grow our Amazon business. What is your? I know. Obviously, it's not it's not a cookie cutter, but what is the sort of broadly speaking the sort of strategy for that for scaling an Amazon business efficiently and effectively using Amazon ads?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So if we're talking about using Amazon ads for context, this has changed over the years and grown, but typically speaking, about 50% of total sales come from advertising
Wow.
for Amazon brands, which is quite significant.
Mm.
That changes if you have a lot of branded search. So again, if you have like those loyal consumer base and that's where a lot of your purchases are happening, it's very possible to get, I don't know, 20 to 40% down. Like if you have a strong product, you maybe could be about, 40 to 50. If you don't have a strong product, you're heavily relying on ads, you might get 60. 70 starts to scare me a little bit, to be honest. I would want you to have better organic search. And then again, strong branded, you're maybe 20 to 30, right? Those are the numbers. So we know that's
Interesting.
kind of like our benchmarks that we're expected to get to.
Mm.
And so where advertising does, again, I'm assuming somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, we're starting from zero," or maybe they have ads and they're like, "Hey, just how do I improve this in general?" Right?
Yep.
Um, I'm gonna take a look at what that split is. So where does your organics lie? What percentage of total sales? We call it ad sale percentage. It's very simple to calculate.
Yep.
You take what is the ad sales and you divide it by total sales and said what percentage, what piece of the pie is this, right?
So you're
And
basically
so
just trying to work out to what extent are you being propped up by ads, and to what
correct.
extent do you have your own organic demand,
Correct.
basically. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. There's some really if you when you start to really get into the nitty-gritty, like okay, where and when and how and the specifics of truly crafting the strategy, you would want to be doing, say like
No, I
keyword
get that, but
research, and you would look at ranking, but oftentimes that's what we find is like so in the weeds. Sellers do this all the time. Like they'll come to me,
hmm,
especially the ones who are self-managed, and they'll say like, "Oh, this and that and the specifics and I'm doing this." And I'm like, "Well, forest for the trees here. We don't even
absolutely.
know directionally how well this is doing. Let's take a zoom out."
Yeah.
And so our zoom out is typically account level and product level is the way that we would group it. Because
Yeah.
really, when I was saying like products, you or listings, you could think of them as landing pages. That's essentially what we're doing is we're advertising across a ton of different landing pages and we're saying like, okay, again, we want to push up that organic. So I would take a look at the brand as a whole because it's typically how business owners think, right? They're like, my business in general, I know I have all these products driving it underneath, but I want to do, I want to increase revenues 20 to
Mm.
30% this year, and I want to be able to get at X. Most brands think of spend in terms of ratio to total sales. The people call it tacos, which is a fantastic
Oh
uh,
wow.
acronym. It's
What does that stand for?
stands for total advertising cost of sale. Again, it's sounds more complicated than it is. It just says like, what is my ad spend divided by total sales? What percentage of my total sales am I spending on ads?
Got you. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Pretty simple. And you
Yep.
can backtrack that, of course. I talk to brands all the time. I say, hey, do you have a totally cost goal or tacos goal? And they say, no, actually, I have no idea how to do that. I heard somebody somewhere say this is good. I'm like, okay, let's figure out what's good for you, right?
Right.
It's very, very simple. It's what is your margins before you spend on any advertising? So you got to factor in landed cost of, cost of
Yeah.
goods, shipping, what is your landed cost? And then, of course, there are certain fees to selling on Amazon. So then they call like the FBA fees or Amazon fees. All right, let's put that together. What is your margins left over? What can you afford to spend without factoring any ads in the case? Okay, so I have a 30 to 40% margin. Fantastic. Okay. So if we even went up to say if we had a 40% margin, if we went up to 20% of that total sale to
Mm.
drive ads, well, we know we at
Mm.
least have a 20% over. I want 25. Okay, yeah, 15 is probably reasonable, right? Totally cost it's very dependent. If you're in sort of more of a scaling phase, I used to say like, oh my gosh, never get beyond 8 or 10%. That's huge, right? These days, that's probably even on the lower end. Some people are closer to 15%. If you're really into scaling, it might be closer to 20. Again,
Mm.
results may vary. So say I have a really strong brand and I have a lot of that brand recognition and search. Well, those I I don't really need to spend ads to get them. I might be doing some external marketing to get them, but I don't need to spend ads. So
Mm.
there where you hear the classic where it's like, oh, 5%, 4%, sometimes you'll hear crazy low numbers and you're like, how are they doing that? It's because they have a recognized brand. If you don't have that sort of safety net of sales to fall back on, you
Yeah.
probably are going to be closer to a 15 to 12%. So it's like, all right, we know all these things are kind of averages. And then
Mm.
it's taking a look at that landscape to say, okay, here are we underperforming in terms of that organic reach? Then how do we make sure that our ads are having the most impact on that organic reach? And that is where a true understanding of the ads platform
Mm.
can be very helpful. So an example would be, I talk to brands all the time. They're like, "Ah, I can't seem to grow, my total sales." So how ads grow total sales is you make sure that your ads are driving again that order velocity, that rank
Yeah.
velocity
Yeah.
on the search terms that make the most sense for you. And I'll look at the overall ad account. And I say, so you're really over invested in video ads. And I was like, yeah, but that's where all my conversions and that's where I get the
Mm.
best performance. And I was like, yeah, but in my experience, again, where Amazon advertising, sort of expertise really just comes from seeing a crap ton of scenarios and pattern
Oh
matching.
yeah. Yeah.
So I'll say, you know what? All the brands that I've audited that have 60 to 70% of their ad spend being invested in video ads, all of them have struggled to rank. And so
Interesting.
therefore, the understanding that we have is that although these video ads may be much more efficient from, say, a ROAS or another Amazon
Yeah.
specific acronym is called ACOS, which is advertising cost of sale. It's the inverse of ROAS. It's instead of taking your ad
Yeah.
sales and divided by spend, you take spend and divide by sales. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And so while you have more efficiency there, just from an ads performance perspective, um, those ad types don't have as big of an impact on your organic search share.
Interesting.
Therefore, maybe we want to take these ads, invest them more here. And that's where sort of you have to be able to see the bigger picture, because if there was no impact on organic ranking from Amazon ads, I would say, well, unless we're running them profitably, unless our ads are profitable from a ROAS again, factoring in ROAS or a cost to
Well,
what is
that's interesting. How often does are you relying then on the organic boost? Are you saying that without the organic boost, often the ads wouldn't be profitable?
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Got you.
Yep. And so that's where it's kind of understanding the product specifics and then crafting that strategically, because we don't want
Mm.
to lose money across all of our ads, right? So if I'm not saying don't run video ads. I'm saying don't run video ads at a loss because there's no impact on
Mm.
little to no impact on the organic search share. I'm not saying don't run sponsored display ads. I'm saying don't run them at a loss. So it's understanding
Yeah.
what pieces and parts of the account make sense. I'm not saying we want to run them at a loss. If I can run them profitably, I absolutely will. How do you run ads profitably? You get a cost per click that is low
Mm.
enough that you can afford. Well, it's an ad
Yeah.
auction. So if my competitors are willing to pay crazy supplement space, insane, $8
Yeah.
a click. How does one do
Yeah.
that, right? But if my competitors are willing to pay $8 and I say, you know what, Amazon, for me to make this work for me, I can only pay $1. They say, that's great. I'll give you a fraction of the impressions, right? And if it's about showing up and getting clicks and getting order velocity, well, that's what the funnel is. It's impressions, clicks, and orders. If you don't get impressions, you're not getting clicks and orders.
No.
So you have to know how to, that's where sort of that long-term strategy comes into play. So I'm not saying, I would never say, hey, let's just always run ads at a loss and we'll make up for it in organic. I'm not saying that. But I
No. Yeah.
am
Of course.
saying there are specific ads, there are specific searches, there are specifics of the account that we will segment these and we'll say these are worth running at this high a cost. Again, not because I want to run at that high a cost, but because
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the bigger picture.
right, but because the competition and the ad auction dictates that if you want to have impact on your organic ranking, this is the cost, this is the pay to play.
Yep, I get that.
And then so you're making strategic decisions that say, okay, this is where it's worth it for me to pay to play. Everything else, profitable
I get
100%
that.
across the board, right? I don't want to lose money everywhere. I want to strategically pick where I'm going to lose that money because again, at the end of the day, it's all about profits, but it's that long-term profit vision because it's not just percentages, it's also profit dollars. So if I pull back and I say, nope, I need to get profitable across the board, and then my impressions decrease, my clicks decrease, my orders decrease, I will start to lower down because I've lost some of that momentum. I will start to show lower and lower in search. I will start to lose market share, which then my total sales volume will decrease as well. And even if I'm making a larger percentage off a smaller piece of the pie, I'm still left with much smaller piece of the pie
In
in the end.
absolute dollars. I mean,
Right.
is it, on Google, there's a sort of a point where, the benefit of ranking is minimal.
Mhm.
Is it like that on Amazon where you kind of got to be in the top 3 or you're basically nowhere? Or is it a bit more linear than that it just sort of gradually decreases? Like, do people scroll to the 20th product?
Yeah.
Because
So
then
people,
the dynamic is, well, you have to put enough money in to, it's like all or nothing, is you have to win
right,
or just
right.
not bother. I don't know. What do you
But
think?
that is a fantastic question. And I think that's what makes Amazon advertising so intriguing to me and also
Mm,
incredibly frustrating is
I can
that
imagine.
it depends on the individual search because the consumer
Yes.
behavior will change based on the individual search. So an example would be this is a search that I did for my daughter. She wanted a very specific blue twirly dress. I found it
Yeah.
on TikTok shop. She fell in love. It was $250. I'm like, girl, you're gonna destroy it. I don't think I want to pay 200.
Yeah.
I'll pay 100. I'll pay 50. Whatever. But like, that's a bit much for me. So I went on a quest to see if I could find a replacement on Amazon. I had a very specific criteria. I had a, mid-length twirl skirt, light blue, thicker straps. She wanted thicker straps. She didn't want thinner. Like, I typed in this very long tail search, and the
Yeah.
search results, as much as I've touted the praises of Amazon's algorithm, it doesn't actually do that great when you have very, very, very specific search criteria. The reason
Mm.
being is because there's not as much consumer search volume on those. So it's a little bit hard to make product to search connections because you don't have that conversion history on them. But
Yep.
like I went down to page, I swear I scrolled down to page 20 for that. And so there are certain terms like that where it depends on the shopper consumer search behavior because there's other terms that you're correct. If you're not ranking within the top 20, forget about it. Like there are certain terms where the difference between 5 and 2 is like night and day in terms of
I
sales.
can imagine. I mean, I can imagine for highly commoditized products, very simple, low
Yeah.
cost products like, clothes pegs, bag clips, freezer bags. I'm just thinking of those kind of things. You get Amazon's choice, whatever Amazon's choice
Yeah.
is. I'm good.
Yeah.
You're not going to go 10 results deep. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm learning so much. It's great. I'm definitely inspired. I'm interested to know how you got into this, Elizabeth. How did you end up co-founding an Amazon advertising agency, and what led you there?
Yeah, it is an interesting story. It was one of, I like to encompass it by saying I fell into it, then I fell in love with it because I think that's pretty much true. So my background is housewife, actually. I went straight from that into this. Um, And so the sort of evolution of it was we were wanting to find some way to make money online, which a lot of us were trying to do. This was, I think,
Mhm.
about 8 years ago, 9 maybe. And that led us, to e-com. it's almost overwhelming, the options, and I think all of them are not necessarily bad options. There's so many things that could work. But one of them was selling on Amazon, which of course led me to the world of advertising and what we've talked about. And I found out that I really, really enjoyed it. But one of the things that I really loved about the community was, again, sort of the openness and willing to share, which I took complete and full advantage of, trying to, figure out how to sell on Amazon. But I do distinctly remember the day. Again, we're trying to figure out this sort of online, world, and how to benefit from
Mm.
it. I was doing dishes, and my husband walked in, and he had been having a conversation, I think, with my brother-in-law, who also worked at an Amazon ads agency. And
Mm.
he was saying that there was a big opportunity, and there was at the time. And it's proven you really enjoy it. And I distinctly remember saying, I can't do it. There's no way. So to me, it
Mhm.
was it was terrifying, the concept of spending other people's money, and failure
Yes.
was not just failure of my own, it was potentially impacting somebody else's life, and that
Yeah.
terrified me. Um, and so I said, "No, I don't think I can." And he said, "I No, we need to do it." And I said, "Fine," because now if I fail, it's your fault because you told me I had to do it. In my mind, that's what made it work. And so I just figured it out, and I still have that. I think that's where a lot of my philosophies or views, or wanting to make sure that I talked about ad strategy and it relating back to profitability, and a very, like, I believe in a very, not just Amazon centric, product centric, but also business centric ad strategy, because there's a lot of things that I found that if we're just simply looking at, say, Amazon ads in isolation, you might have a completely different answer than looking and defining
Mm.
and, say, like, business goals or objectives, and then making sure that ad strategy mirrors what makes sense there, or at least laying out the playing field and say, okay, these are our options. There's pros and cons.
Yep.
Given what you want in business, I know that there's some cons here, but I feel like this is the best path. Um, so I've kind of kept that. So it's just been a it's been a roller coaster of saying yes to the things that terrify me, and then figuring out somewhere along the way I think I'm actually kind of good at it, which has been
Nice.
fantastic.
That's great. That's great. A good story. I think it's always cliche advice in these things,
Yeah.
but it's true that you're never ready
No, you're
um,
not.
to do these things. You just got to jump in, and that's what the people who are successful in anything do. They don't wait till they're ready, do they?
Mm-mm.
So that's really good. Just to close, give us your three top tips for someone getting into, or they just recently got started with Amazon ads. Like, what are your three best little nuggets of advice?
Great question. So I would say focus in on sponsored products.
Hmm.
You're gonna have a ton of things so that you're gonna feel like you need to do branded and display, and you're gonna feel like you're missing out on a lot. Yes, you are missing out on an ad type, but as I said, that one has the biggest impact on organic ranking. If you have a small budget, definitely just, if you have 100% of your spend in the beginning in sponsored product ads, you're not going to miss out on something that's going to be so impactful it's going to hurt you. So I would say, uh, you have my permission to just double down on that and not worry about it till you have the budget to do so.
Nice.
My second tip is going to be understanding the relation between, again, ranking and what you're doing on advertising.
Mm.
Um, the best way to really enable this, the most important thing to understand and to get correct in Amazon advertising, as complicated as it has gotten over the years, and I've been doing this 8 years, is bid management. That was my original
Mm.
thesis in the beginning. Is still my thesis, and is why we actually built our own internal tech and have our own bid algorithm.
Wow.
Is because I dove into that head first, understanding the nuances of it, and understanding that, again, it is an auction. So I think where most new sellers get it wrong is they'll say, "Oh, this is too expensive. It's at a loss." And I'm not saying, "Oh, don't touch it. Just always run it at a loss." But I'm saying if it is driving sales velocity for you, as soon as if you turn that down too aggressively,
Yeah.
you will lose that momentum. And so you will sort of see, that's where I talk to new sellers all the time where they're like, oh, I've gone in and optimized, and all of a sudden, like, all the numbers are worse. It's
Yeah.
because you turned down too hard on the key terms that were really sort of driving that growth for you. So you can figure it out if you focus on sponsored product ads, focus on bid
Mm.
optimization, focus on relevancy.
Mm.
Relevancy to your products. I know you're probably going to do keyword research and you're going to come away with like hundreds of keywords that you want to test and a million things that you want to try. And you're like, oh, look at the volume. If I could only do this, where the potentials be? Look at it in relation to your product. We have internal keyword research tools, a ton of things at my disposal. I still, when I'm doing intense keyword research, will always go and look and see, what does the search page look like on Amazon? Does my
Yes.
product fit within this search page? You still, like, if you're being very curated, if you have a limited budget, that means less keywords you're advertising on. You want to get very, very intentional with what you're doing. So I'd say if you focus on the order velocity, again, through good
Yep.
keyword picking, through good bid management, focusing on sponsored product ads, that's where you're going to have the most impact. Everything around it, just, like all the placement percentages and budget optimizations and what bidding strategy am I using and negative, all of those things are simply ways to make sure you're showing up on the right search pages and you're
Yep.
paying an amount that makes sense for you, given, again, those long-term, say, ranking goals or profitability goals. All of those other things are tweaks and tips and things
Yeah.
to try and do those things better. And so if you just focus in on doing those things as well as you possibly can, then eventually, as you sort of move into maybe a little bit more of those sophisticated options,
Mm.
those will make sense in the context of, oh, this is what I'm trying to achieve, so therefore this tweak makes sense and this tweak makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, once you've got those kind of core things that you
Mm-hmm.
talked about first, right, then you can do the refinement.
Mm-hmm.
There's some similarities with what you said there with Google Ads,
Yeah.
for sure. But Amazon Ads is a very different beast, and it has been absolutely fascinating to hear you talk about it in the depth and with the clarity that you've done. And I really appreciate that, Elizabeth. I really have learned a lot. So yeah, thank you so much. Just tell people where they can find and connect with you online.
Yeah. So if you want me to take a look at your Amazon ads, if you're running them, promise you I won't try and hard sell you. My goal is to like do an audit of your account that's so amazing. You're like, oh my gosh, please take care of it for me. If not, hope you get value. But the best way to reach out for that is going to be our website, which is junglr.com. If you just want to know what are my heads at with Amazon ads or want some like, kind of more tips and general stuff, the best place to follow me is on LinkedIn.
Great, we'll do that. Well, thanks again, and I hope to chat to you soon.